At 11:33 local time, the Gulf of Aden, 40 nautical miles southwest of the port of Aden, is doing what it does in late October, moving heat between the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, with the passive efficiency of a geography that has been doing this for millennia and regards the presence of warships as a temporary arrangement relative to its own timeline. The surface temperature is 29 degrees Celsius. The water clarity for approximately the first 30 meters is what divers describe as good, and what sonar operators describe as acoustically complicated, because the Gulf of Aden's thermal layering in October produces sound propagation conditions that change with depth and with position along the shelf edge in ways that the textbooks characterize accurately, and that operational reality confirms with the consistency of a physical law that has no interest in operational convenience. Below 30 meters, the shelf drops sharply. The water column becomes what it becomes when it gets deep quickly, which is cold and dark and acoustically different from the 30 meters above it. USS Cole, hull number DDG-67, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, is making 11 knots on a transit track through the Gulf of Aden toward the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The ship has been in this part of the world for 4 months. The crew knows the Gulf of Aden the way you know something you have been paying careful attention to for a long time. Not with comfort, because the Gulf of Aden in 2024 does not reward comfort, but with the specific familiarity that comes from watching a body of water long enough to understand its habits and to have strong professional opinions about any deviation from them. The tactical picture at 11:33 is dense. The Gulf of Aden is always dense. Commercial traffic on the shipping lanes, dhows and small fishing craft in the coastal zones, an international naval coalition presence that includes vessels from multiple nations coordinating against the same Houthi maritime threat through the same waters with the same professional patience of people who have been doing this long enough to have strong opinions about it. Before anything else about this morning, there is something about this ship that needs to be said directly. USS Cole was here before, not in the Gulf of Aden precisely, but close, in Aden Harbor on October 12, 2000, when a small boat approached during a routine fuel stop and the people aboard it made a decision that resulted in 17 U.S. Navy sailors not coming home. The Cole survived. She was repaired. She came back to service. The people who sail her now carry that history in the way that all members of a community carry the history of their community. Not as a weight that slows them down, but as a context that makes the weight of their job legible. The Gulf of Aden is not just another patrol area for USS Cole. It is also in the specific way that places are shaped by what has happened in them. The place where the Cole learned what this part of the world costs when you stop paying attention. Nobody aboard USS Cole has stopped paying attention. In the Combat Information Center, the watch section is managing the tactical picture with the heightened attention that Gulf of Aden transit watch requires, which is several degrees above the baseline heightened attention that any Sixth Fleet watch requires, because the Houthi maritime threat in this body of water has been adding contact types to the classification matrix with the improvised ingenuity of an organization that has decided that if the sea surface is becoming too well defended, the answer is to operate below it. The intelligence digest for the current week had included a 3-paragraph annex on unmanned underwater vehicle activity in the southern Red Sea and western Gulf of Aden, a summary of collection events, technical assessments, and operational pattern observations that described a Houthi program in its early deployment phase. Small, slow, limited in range and payload, but present. Present in a body of water where the word present requires more operational attention than it requires in most places. At 11:33, the hull-mounted SQS-53C sonar acquired a contact. The contact was not a submarine, surface vessel, or marine mammal, though the Gulf of Aden produces enough dolphin traffic to give sonar operators regular practice at that classification. Bearing 145, range approximately 800 meters, depth approximately 14 meters, moving at approximately 6 knots. The acoustic signature was not in the threat library under any established entry. It was in the entry the intelligence community had been building for 8 months, Houthi UUV probable. With a confidence qualifier, the sonar operator had just upgraded from possible. He had never classified an actual underwater drone in operational conditions. He had classified the reference signature approximately 40 times in training. The reference signature matched closely enough to say, possible, UUV contact, bearing 145, range 800 meters, depth 14 meters, speed 6 knots, confidence, medium. The sonar supervisor looked at the contact for 9 seconds. He had been a sonar operator for 11 years. He had never classified an actual underwater drone in operational conditions. He had classified the reference signature approximately 40 times during training events and exercises, and the reference signature matched what he was looking at now closely enough to say what he was about to say, and what he was about to say was possible UUV contact, bearing 145, range 800 meters, depth 14 meters, speed 6 knots, confidence medium. He called it to the tactical action officer. The tactical action officer had the commanding officer in CIC in 40 seconds. Here is the vulnerability that made the next 19 minutes the most operationally significant 19 minutes of the transit. The contact was at 800 meters. 800 meters from USS Cole's current position, bearing 145, which placed it on the starboard quarter, behind and to the right, approaching from a bearing that would bring it into the ship's starboard side, unless the contact altered course, or the ship altered course, or the contact was classified and engaged, or the contact turned out to be something else. 800 meters is approximately the range at which the options for a ship making 11 knots begin to narrow relative to a contact making 6 knots on an intercept bearing, because geometry and speed have a relationship that 11 knots and 800 meters enforce with the consistency of physics. The vulnerability was not tactical. The ship had options. The vulnerability was classificatory. The SQS-53C had a contact at medium confidence in a new threat category with no confirmed prior engagement data against the live target, in an acoustic environment that the Gulf of Aden's thermal layering was making deliberately unhelpful, and the classification confidence threshold for employing the countermeasures available to an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer against an underwater contact is not medium. The rules of engagement for underwater contacts in this body of water, at this range, at this threat category, required a classification confidence of high before the response options that the tactical situation was beginning to suggest became available. The contact was at medium. The contact was at 800 meters. The contact was making 6 knots on an intercept bearing. The commanding officer looked at the tactical picture for 3 seconds. Then, come right 20 degrees. Reduce to 8 knots. What do we have for prosecution assets? SH-60 is on deck, sir. 10 minutes to airborne. The Mk-54 lightweight torpedo is loaded. The anti-submarine warfare coordinator paused. We also have the acoustic countermeasure noisemakers, if we want to complicate the contact's guidance picture. Hold on the noisemakers. Get the helo airborne. What's the contact doing? Steady, bearing 145, sir. Range now 740 meters. Contact appears to be maintaining course. 740 meters. 11 minutes to the SH-60 airborne. The course change had opened the geometric relationship slightly. Not enough to consider the situation resolved, but enough to create space for the prosecution to develop without the options, narrowing faster than the confidence was building. The commanding officer had made the right navigation decision and the right prosecution decision simultaneously, which is what commanding officers are selected and trained to do, and he had made both of them in approximately 4 seconds. Now, the Houthi unmanned underwater vehicle, what it is, and what the specific combination of ingenuity, Iranian technical support, and the operational imagination of an organization that has been at war for a decade has produced in the waters of the Gulf of Aden. The Houthi UUV program is genuinely new in the global inventory of threats that surface ship crews are required to take seriously. What the intelligence community has assessed: a platform approximately 2.5 to 3 meters in length, electric propulsion, maximum speed 6 to 8 knots, range 20 to 40 nautical miles at battery capacity, and a warhead assessed at 40 to 60 kilograms of shaped charge material. Not a warhead that threatens a destroyer's structural integrity. A warhead that could produce localized hull damage that the ship would survive and that the maintenance team would write about for several months. Its guidance combines GPS-referenced waypoint navigation with an acoustic terminal seeker that finds the specific target by listening for propulsion and machinery noise. A missile that navigates by the sound of what it is trying to find, which is its tactical strength and its intelligence vulnerability. Because a system that emits to function is a system the SLQ-25 can hear. The guidance architecture is where the Houthi UUV becomes interesting from both the threat and the countermeasure perspective. The acoustic seeker, the terminal guidance phase that switches on when the UUV enters the target's acoustic environment, is listening for the specific acoustic signatures of large surface vessels, propulsion noise, machinery noise, hydrodynamic flow noise. It is, in this sense, a missile that navigates by the sound of what it is trying to find. This is both its tactical strength and its intelligence vulnerability. Because a system that navigates by acoustic signature is a system that must emit to function in its terminal phase, and a system that must emit to function in its terminal phase is a system that the SLQ-25 can hear, and the SLQ-25 had been hearing it since 11:33. At 11:39, 6 minutes after first contact, the SH-60 Seahawk was airborne. The helicopter's dipping sonar went into the water at 11:43, 200 meters ahead of the contact's projected track based on the SLQ-25's developing solution. The dipping sonar acquired the contact at 11:44 at approximately 11 meters depth, shallower than the SLQ-25's initial classification, which was consistent with the UUV adjusting its depth in response to the thermal layer transition it was passing through. The dipping sonar's signal quality at 200 meters was considerably better than the SLQ-25's signal quality at the opening range, and the acoustic operator in the helicopter's cabin had the contact's signature on her display within 30 seconds of water entry. "What's the dipping sonar showing?" the ASW coordinator called to the helicopter's crew. "Clean contact, sir. Narrowband tonal at 43 hertz, consistent with electric motor drive at 6 knots. Depth 11 meters, course 135, speed steady." A brief pause. There's also an intermittent broadband burst, approximately every 18 seconds. The ASW coordinator looked at this for 2 seconds. "The broadband burst. What bandwidth?" "Wide, 2 to 8 kilohertz. 18-second interval, consistent across the last 3 cycles. 2 to 8 kilohertz, 18-second interval." The acoustic seeker's interrogation cycle. The UUV's terminal guidance was active. It was pinging, listening for the return from USS Cole's hull, using the response to refine its terminal approach. The contact was in its terminal guidance phase. The confidence level on the classification upgraded from medium to high at 1146, based on the acoustic seeker's active interrogation signature, matching the reference profile from the Intelligence Digest UUV characterization annex with the specific correlation that high confidence requires. High confidence. The tactical action officer updated the engagement authority. The commanding officer looked at the picture. Range 420 meters. Course 135, closing. Speed 6 knots, unchanged. The Mk-54 lightweight torpedo and the SH-60 was ready. The ship's CIWS systems, designed for surface and air targets, were not applicable to a contact at 11 meters depth. The Mk-46 torpedo in the ship's surface mount was available. The SH-60's Mk-54 was the cleaner option, geometrically, but the commanding officer looked at the acoustic seeker's interrogation pattern and made a different first decision. Acoustic countermeasures. Deploy the noisemakers. Now, the acoustic countermeasure system, the AN/SLQ-25 Nixie, a towed decoy that generates acoustic noise designed to seduce the acoustic seekers of incoming torpedoes, is not, in its standard design intent, a countermeasure against underwater drones with acoustic terminal guidance. The AN/SLQ-25 is a torpedo decoy, but a torpedo decoy works by being acoustically louder than the ship it is protecting in the frequency bands that acoustic seekers use to find their targets, which includes the 2 to 8 kilohertz band that the UUV's seeker was interrogating. The Nixie was not designed for this. The Nixie was also the fastest deployable acoustic countermeasure available. Deployable in approximately 90 seconds, and its acoustic output in the target's guidance frequency band was worth trying before expending a Mk-54. The Nixie deployed at 11:47. The helicopter's dipping sonar watched the UUV's behavior for the next 40 seconds with the focused attention of a sensor operator who has been told to watch what happens and report it accurately. What happened? The UUV's course changed. Not dramatically, not immediately. The course change began approximately 12 seconds after the Nixie reached its operating depth. 12 seconds that the acoustic operator noted and logged as the delay between the countermeasure's deployment and the UUV seeker's first interrogation cycle that included the Nixie's output in its acoustic environment. The course change was approximately 15 degrees to port toward the Nixie's deployed position and was followed 6 seconds later by a secondary course correction back toward the original bearing, which the acoustic operator described as consistent with a guidance system that had found a competing acoustic source, evaluated it, and was attempting to resolve the ambiguity between the decoy and the actual ship. The contact is responding to the Nixie, the helicopter's acoustic operator reported. Course deviation 15 degrees port, then correcting. It's trying to decide which source to follow. This is the intelligence value of what just happened, and it is worth noting specifically. The Houthi UUV's acoustic seeker had just revealed its discrimination algorithm, the process by which it evaluates competing acoustic sources and selects the correct target. The fact that it initially deviated toward the Nixie and then corrected indicated that the seeker's discrimination had detected the difference between the Nixie's acoustic signature and the ship's acoustic signature within approximately 6 seconds and had corrected accordingly. 6 seconds of ambiguity, then correction. The seeker's discrimination capability was now a documented behavioral characteristic. The frequency preference that had allowed it to distinguish decoy from ship was now inferable, from the correction geometry. The 18-second interrogation interval was confirmed. The guidance algorithm's response to a decoy was characterized from a live operational contact in conditions that no previous collection event had provided. At 11:49, the commanding officer authorized the Mk-54 engagement. The helicopter's crew had a firing solution. The Mk-54 lightweight torpedo entered the water at 11:49 and 31 seconds. The Mk-54 is a 323-pound torpedo carrying a 60-pound high-explosive warhead, guided by active/passive acoustic homing, capable of operating in the shallow water environment where heavier torpedoes lose effectiveness. At 11 meters, against a 2.5-meter electric propulsion vehicle making 6 knots, the Mk-54's acquisition geometry produced a solution in approximately 8 seconds, which is the specific time it takes an active acoustic homing torpedo to find a small, slow target in a thermally stratified environment when the target is being lit up by its own acoustic seeker's interrogation pulses. The Mk-54 followed its own guidance to the contact's position. The engagement was confirmed at 11:50 and 14 seconds. The contact resolved. The sonar picture showed the specific acoustic signature of an underwater vehicle ceasing to be an intact underwater vehicle, which produces a characteristic broadband transient followed by silence at the relevant bearing. Total time from the first contact to engagement confirmation, 17 minutes and 14 seconds. The tactical action officer logged it. The commanding officer looked at the clear sonar picture for 3 seconds. Get me a damage assessment if there's any recoverable debris, and forward the acoustic package to 5th Fleet immediately. The acoustic package. 17 minutes of continuous recording from first contact at 800 meters to engagement confirmation. The SQS-53C had captured the full transition from waypoint navigation to acoustic seeker activation, the seeker's interrogation pattern, and 18-second interval. The SH-60's dipping sonar had the same signature at higher signal quality, including the pulse shape, and the Nixie interaction had produced the seeker's discrimination behavior, the deviation, the correction timing, the resolution sequence, that no technical intelligence could have provided without a live contact responding to a live countermeasure in operational conditions. The acoustic package from this contact is going to be the most complete Houthi UUV characterization assembled to date. The ASW coordinator told the executive officer at 12:15 during the post-engagement brief. Prior characterization was based on imagery collection and technical assessment, not acoustic data from an operational contact. We now have acoustic data from both sensors through the full engagement, including the seeker activation, the interrogation cycle, and the decoy response behavior. The decoy response specifically. Yes, ma'am. The seeker's discrimination algorithm, the fact that it corrected from the Nixie in 6 seconds, tells us something important about the frequency preference built into the discrimination logic. If the seeker can distinguish a Nixie from a hull signature in 6 seconds, it means the discrimination is based on something other than raw amplitude, probably spectral characteristics. That narrows the countermeasure development problem considerably. The executive officer made a note. The note was precise because precision is what this category of observation requires when it is going to be used by people who develop countermeasures. The note became part of the intelligence annex that was transmitted to 5th Fleet, to CENTCOM, to the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, and to the Defense Intelligence Agency's Maritime Threat Directorate before USS Cole cleared the Gulf of Aden's western approaches. Debris. At 12:07, the SH-60 crew reported floating material at the contact's last position. The helicopter's camera documented it. Fragments of a composite hull structure, an electric motor housing, and what the crew's photographic record identified as a guidance system component that was partially intact and recoverable. The helicopter crew marked the position. A request for a surface recovery asset went to 5th Fleet at 12:09. The recovery of even partial guidance system hardware from a Houthi UUV would provide the Naval Undersea Warfare Center with something the technical intelligence community had not previously had access to: physical evidence of the guidance electronics architecture rather than acoustic inference of it. The request was marked priority. Here is the accounting the Houthi UUV program's operators would not include. The vehicle had been deployed, navigated to its datum area, activated its acoustic seeker, and been engaged before reaching its target. Cost approximately $40,000. The Mk-54 that engaged it, $900,000. The economic ratio is uncomfortable for the defending side, and the Houthi program's analysts will note it. What those analysts will not know, the vehicle produced 17 minutes of acoustic characterization data, a seeker discrimination profile, and a debris field with recoverable guidance electronics. The first operational deployment of a new weapon system is also the first contribution to the adversary's countermeasure library. The program will deploy again. The library will be ready. Al Masirah Television had a broadcast ready at 1700 local time. The armed forces of Yemen had conducted a successful maritime operation in the Gulf of Aden, deploying advanced naval systems against the American aggressor. The broadcast described the operation in terms that acknowledged the vehicle's deployment and activation without describing what had happened after activation, which is the specific editorial limitation available when your battle damage assessment capability ends at the moment of weapon release and you do not have a camera at 11 meters depth at the point of engagement. The broadcast was confident. The production values were professional. The footage showed Houthi naval personnel in operational dress, which was genuine footage of genuine personnel, and the narration described a program that was real and developing and operationally present in these waters. All of that is accurate. The broadcast did not include the 17-minute acoustic characterization. The broadcast did not include the seeker discrimination profile. The broadcast did not include the debris field coordinates that the surface recovery asset was en route to. These details would not have improved the broadcast from the production team's perspective. From the Naval Undersea Warfare Center's perspective, they were the entire point of the morning. USS Cole's deck log for the engagement period read, 11:33 to 11:50, UUV contact, SQS-53C, bearing 145, range 800 meters at acquisition, SH-60 airborne, 11:39, dipping sonar acquisition, 11:44. Classification confirmed high confidence, 11:46. Acoustic seeker interrogation signature. AN/SLQ-25 deployed 11:47. Mk-54 employed 11:49. Engagement confirmed 11:50. No damage, no personnel losses. Acoustic package forwarded 5th Fleet 1200. Debris field marked. Recovery requested 12:09. The intelligence annex was 7 pages. 7 pages in 17 minutes, which is a ratio that says something about the operational density of acoustic events when the acoustic environment is working in your favor and the contact is broadcasting its guidance logic into your collection system the entire time it is approaching. USS Cole transited the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at 16:30 and entered the Red Sea. The watch section at 16:30 was the same watch section that had been on at 11:33, because nothing about the afternoon had produced the kind of event that generates a watch relief ahead of schedule, and the watch section's collective attention had not decreased from the level it maintains in the Gulf of Aden, regardless of what happens or does not happen between 11:33 and 16:30. The tactical picture in the Red Sea was what it is in the Red Sea: complex, Houthi adjacent, professionally requiring. The SQS-53C was listening. The Naval Undersea Warfare Center's assessment of the acoustic package arrived at 5th Fleet 48 hours later. It was 11 pages and included a preliminary countermeasure recommendation based on the seeker discrimination profile, specifically targeting the spectral characteristics that had allowed the seeker to correct from the Nixie decoy in 6 seconds. The recommendation was not a fix for the existing Nixie. It was a modification requirement for the next version of the acoustic countermeasure family, based on the frequency preference the seeker's discrimination had revealed. The modification requirement was flagged for the next procurement cycle. The next Houthi UUV that activates its acoustic seeker in the Gulf of Aden will find that the discrimination algorithm it relies on has been characterized, that the countermeasure frequency profile has been updated to address its spectral preference, and that the acoustic library entry that the first operational contact created is now loaded on every U.S. and Allied ASW-capable platform in the theater. The first deployment was also the calibration event. The program will deploy again. The acoustic library will be ready. The Gulf of Aden does not remember anything. The sonar library does. Bye for now.